Most people think they understand what the FCC does: radio stations, TV stations, cell phones, broadband, spectrum licenses, and robocalls. Yeah, sure, that's part of it. But every once in a while something happens that reminds us that the FCC reaches much deeper into public safety than most people realize. And this week is one of those moments, because the FCC just took a series of fast-moving actions in order to support the implementation of the Safer Skies Act. And on the surface, it might sound like a drone story, but it's really much bigger than that. It's a story about technology, a story about spectrum, a story about local law enforcement authority, and a story about legal restrictions catching up to operational reality. And more important than everything else, it's a story about what happens when people responsible for protecting the public can see a threat, have the tools available to respond, but still need the legal clarity to act. And that's what we're talking about today on TiPS, Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm a NENA-certified EMP, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I bring you some of the latest news and information related to communications and public safety. Why this event matters. The FCC's action today on July 2nd supports the implementation of the Safer Skies Act, designed to expand counter-drone authority to those that are trained. Now, this matters a lot because drones are no longer a future problem. They're here. They're useful, they're innovative, they're powerful, and they're very affordable. But in the wrong hands, they can be deadly. While a drone can help public safety in situations like search and rescue, providing fire command a better view of the scene, helping law enforcement monitor an incident, as well as supporting disaster response. But a main problem is also that a drone can be used to threaten a major event. It can easily fly over a stadium where it can become part of a larger criminal terrorist scenario. So the public safety question becomes simple. When a drone becomes a credible threat, who's allowed to do something about it? And that question is anything but simple. Because many counter-drone technologies involve spectrum or radio waves. They may detect radio frequency activity, they may track command and control links, they may interfere with control channels or disrupt navigation, and they may jam signals. And once you start talking about spectrum and interference, you wind up standing right in the path of the FCC. And that's why this matters, because it's not just about drones. It's about whether the legal and regulatory framework is able to keep up with the threat environment that public safety is already facing. The public safety problem. Look, here's the problem in plain English. Public safety can be responsible for protecting an event, a facility, a crowd, a prison, or a critical infrastructure site. They may be able to see the drone, and they may know the drone doesn't belong there. And they may have a reason to believe that it presents a credible threat. But the problem is that historically, the authority that's able to take action against that drone has been limited, complicated, and often centered at the federal level. And there are certainly good reasons for that. You don't want every agency, venue, campus, or private security operation randomly jamming signals. That's just going to create a bunch of uncoordinated interference. You don't want public safety radio systems, cellular networks, aviation systems, GPS, Wi-Fi, or other critical services accidentally disrupted by poorly controlled counter-drone equipment. So yeah, there's a lot of room for caution here. But caution can also become paralysis. And that's where the real issue starts to appear. When your threat starts changing faster than the rules, the people responsible for protecting the public usually end up handcuffed by the very framework that's supposed to protect the public. But not handcuffs on the suspect, handcuffs on the responders. Now, they may have responsibility, they may have the training, they may have the equipment, and they may have credible threats right in front of them. But without having clear authority, they may hesitate. And as anyone will tell you, in public safety, hesitation caused by legal uncertainty is an operational risk. The FCC action. Okay, so what did the FCC do? Well, the Commission took several expedited steps to support the Safer Skies Act that helped state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement, as well as correctional agencies, to move from concept to controlled operational capability. So first, the FCC addressed the equipment. The Office of Engineering and Technology issued a waiver allowing certain counter-drone equipment that's on the Safer Skies Authorized Systems list to be marketed, imported, and operated by qualified agencies before that equipment receives the full FCC equipment authorization. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of paperwork. It's not. You see, if authorized agencies are going to be trained and certified to respond to a credible drone threat, then the equipment cannot remain stuck in regulatory limbo. Now, the second action, that involves spectrum, or frequencies. The FCC provided broad temporary spectrum for authorized agencies to deploy approved counter-drone systems. Now, that matters because counter-drone systems usually rely on different spectrum bands, and those bands may evolve as drone technology evolves. The third action involves Section 333 of the Communications Act. Now, I know we all can recite that by heart, but for the few that can't, here's what it is, because this is where things get very interesting. The FCC clarified that trained authorized state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement and correctional personnel may engage in counter-drone signal jamming under the authority of the Safer Skies Act without Section 333 liability. I know that sounds like blah, 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 but that is a big deal. Because if you're standing in the middle of a major event operation and suddenly you've got a drone that becomes a credible threat, you need to know whether your authorized response tool is legal before you use it. Not take a chance and find out after the incident, after the legal review, after the drone has already crossed the perimeter, but before. And that's what the legal clarity provides. Now, the fourth action, that involved testing. And that's where the FCC clarified that parties testing counter-drone jammers under an experimental authorization don't violate Section 333 when they control both the jamming equipment and the drone being jammed. Now, that matters a lot because technology definitely needs to be tested before it's deployed. Public safety doesn't need any equipment that only works on paper. They got enough of that in their network. No, it needs tools that have been tested, understood, trained on, and then placed inside a controlled operating framework. The DC advantage. So this is where the federal coordination piece matters. The Safer Skies Act came from Congress. DHS and DOJ issued the framework on how qualified agencies can conduct counter-drone operations. Then the FCC moved quickly to address the communications law, spectrum, interference, equipment, and testing pieces that all sit inside its authority. That's the DC advantage, and not bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, but multiple federal agencies aligning their pieces of the puzzle so that public safety can actually operate. Because without that alignment, the Safer Skies Act could exist on paper, while local agencies are still asking, can we buy the equipment? Can vendors market it? Can we import it? Can we test it? Can we operate it? Can we use the spectrum that's needed? And can we jam a hostile drone without violating federal law? Now, those aren't minor questions. Those are questions that determine whether public safety is able to respond. And that's exactly where the FCC becomes much more than just a spectrum regulator. It becomes a public safety force multiplier. The technology reality. Now, this is also another reminder that public safety has no longer just radios, patrol cars, fire trucks, ambulances, and dispatch consoles. Public safety is now built on networks, spectrum, IP infrastructure, sensors, cameras, drones, counter-drones, cloud platforms, APIs, mobile devices, AI, data feeds, location systems, and NG911. And every single one of those technologies brings capability. But every one of them also brings governance questions. Who can use it? Who authorizes it? Who trains on it? Who monitors it? Who audits it? What happens when it fails? What happens when it interferes with something else? And what happens when the tool creates a brand new risk? That's the world that we're in now. And drones are a perfect example. They're not just an aviation issue. They're not just a law enforcement issue. They're not just a technology issue. They're a spectrum issue, a public safety issue, a homeland security issue, a correctional facility issue, a major event issue, a critical infrastructure issue, and that's why the FCC is involved. Reality check. Now, this doesn't mean everybody gets to jam everything. No, that would be dangerous. Counter-drone authority is a powerful thing. Signal jamming is actually very serious because signal interference can create real consequences. The wrong equipment used the wrong way by the wrong people in the wrong place could create its own public safety problem. So this definitely isn't about unlimited authority, it's about controlled authority. It's about trained personnel, authorized equipment, defined operating conditions, all with temporary spectrum authority and federal oversight, testing, compliance, documentation, and auditability. And that's the balance that public safety needs, not chaos, capability. Not a free-for-all, a framework. And that's what makes this FCC action important. They're also helping define the lane where authorized public safety action can occur. And to be honest, that's how regulation should work when the threat environment changes. The rulebook shouldn't just disappear, but it also shouldn't handcuff the very people responsible for protecting the public either. Why 911 should care. So why should the 911 community care about counter-drone and policy? Well, it's because this is the same pattern we see across the entire spectrum of public safety technology in this environment. Technology changes, the threat changes. Public expectations also change, but the legal and regulatory framework usually moves slower. And that gap creates friction. We see it in NG911, we see it in location, we see it in multimedia, and we see it in AI. It's visible in cybersecurity, school safety, and enterprise data, and we see it in swatting. Now, we see it in counter-drone response actions. The question is always the same. When technology creates a new public safety reality, can the rules evolve fast enough to support the people who have to respond? This week, the FCC gave us one example of what this looks like. Not the final answer, not the end of the conversation, but a very real step towards aligning law, technology, training, and operational need. And that's something public safety should definitely pay attention to. The bottom line. Look, here's the bottom line on all this. Most people will never read the FCC fact sheet. There's a link in the description of this podcast if you want to. People are not going to study Section 333. Most won't understand the equipment authorization. They won't think about temporary spectrum authority. And they won't ask whether a local agency has clear authority to operate their counter-drone equipment before the threat appeared. And quite honestly, look, if everything works the way it should, they may never have to. But public safety leaders, you need to take notice. Because this isn't just a drone story. It's a regulatory story. It's a technology story, and it's a public safety authority story. It's a reminder that the FCC's role extends much farther than standard operational public safety, which most people won't even imagine. Sometimes public safety needs a dispatcher, sometimes it needs a radio channel, other times it needs a network, and sometimes it needs a law. And along with that comes the need for waivers and potentially spectrum authority. And sometimes, under certain conditions, it needs to get the federal government to recognize that the threat environment has changed, and the rules, now they need to catch up. And that's exactly what this action represents. Technology without authority is just equipment. Authority without training is risk. Training without legal clarity is going to create hesitation. But when the law, the technology, the training, and the mission all line up, public safety is actually able to respond. And that's the reason why the FCC's Safer Skies action matters. That's why this topic is worth watching. And that was today's tips today in public safety. This is Fletch. I hope that gave you something to think about, and if it did, please like, subscribe, and tell a friend. Tips is published every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and streams 24/7 at 911tips.com. Thanks so much for listening, and if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Hey, it's Fletch. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you learned something new. Remember to catch all of my previous episodes of Tips Today in Public Safety, published every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on most social media platforms and streaming 24/7 at 911tips.com. My blogs are located at fletch.tv, and my personal website is at fletch911.com. Remember to like and subscribe. It really helps out the algorithms. And if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG 911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10 spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.